It is a good thing to be with all of you on a Friday night right here at the Voice of College Football. And we will be here with you for the next 3 hours. The first two talking Oklahoma, Texas, and a little Fresno State, San Diego State, and SMU. And then for the final hour from 8 to 9, we've got West Virginia Live, Mountaineers Live right here at the Voice of College Football for a 52nd week. That sounds like we've been doing it for a year, with Golden Blue Dude coming on board at 8 o'clock Eastern time to talk West Virginia football. Before that, though, we will take your calls, we will take your comments, and also your questions. And I need to get the number in the live chat. I need to get the link in the live chat. I'm going back to the days of our call-in show, which we still have a call-in show, but now it's, of course, through the StreamYard link. So let's get that to you. But just released a video. Check it out. You know what the deal here is at the Voice of College Football is that anytime we have any type of matchup that can be broken down, and certainly with all these conference shakeups, all the realignment, all the expansion, as soon as USC and UCLA moved, We talked about how those two teams would fare against the Big Ten, and Oklahoma and Texas, the same thing. Now, we just released a video just a few minutes ago on Oklahoma versus the SEC. So basically, I sized up the last 10 years and how Oklahoma has performed against the SEC, how Oklahoma has performed against the Big 12, and also against other Power 5 opponents, and then made a projection of how the Sooners would fare in the SEC over the next 10 years. Check it out. We will do the same with Texas. I've got all my numbers in front of me. We will break down that video. I will record that and release it when I get a chance. Hopefully, that will happen on a Saturday. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. We, of course, take your comments and questions. Let me leave the link, which I should have already done, so we can invite all of you in to talk college football. In the meantime, I will remind everyone that the Great Oreo Challenge is coming soon. I will also run down my thoughts on Oklahoma, Texas, and also, since we've known about that going back a year and a half, I'm much more intrigued by what we talked about on Monday night with Tony Altimore concerning SMU's entry into the Pac-12, which seems all but a foregone conclusion. I just looked over an article in, there was one in The Athletic, and all over the place. I was scouring the various reports, which didn't tell us a whole lot in addition to what we already knew. But basically, the Pac-12 presidents have gotten together. They've discussed it. They have generally agreed upon it. Now we've got lawyers involved. They have to work out the details. They have to work out the timing. And you got to figure that the details are pretty extensive when you have major institutions and their athletic programs moving from one conference to another. So, legal nightmare, but hey, these conferences have to be getting good at it at this point. But of course, we saw Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff. I'm going to get that pronunciation down at some point. I got to hear it and then repeat it, because when I haven't heard it for weeks, then it's gone. Kliavkoff. There it is. Kliavkoff. He was at the SMU basketball game the other night and visited campus. He just didn't show up to an SMU basketball game because he loves American Conference basketball. No. He was talking business there at SMU. Then we've got San Diego State, which we believe will be coupled with SMU. Will the Pac-12 look beyond that? Fresno State. I lined it up this way when we first had this situation after USC and UCLA took off last summer. I lined up San Diego State as the number one candidate by far, and Fresno State, for me, the number two candidate. I then looked at SMU, and I had them right in the mix as well. So this is all following logical thinking, of course, and they have their best interest in mind much more than I do. I weigh heavy football, of course, because that's what we do here at the Voice of College Football, but I try to take into consideration using our good buddy Tony Altimore. That's why we bring him on, because he brings reality into it and brings the objective analysis of all the other factors that are involved, not in any way saying that this or that is going to happen for sure, because there's a lot of this that involves relationship building. That's what's amazing about just being out in business and industry, in corporations. And I got to think that the same thing holds true in institutions, although my academic background is pretty limited. I've got myself a bachelor's degree. I have not stepped on foot of a college campus since I don't want to say, a long, long time ago. So the way institutions, academic institutions, those places of higher learning, I could comment on how they work in certain situations from a cultural or social aspect that I wouldn't necessarily have very kind things to say about that. But in terms of how they do their business, That's why we get the insight from Tony. But you put it all together, football prowess, overall athletic prowess, brand, cultural aspects, academic considerations to be made. And then, oh, yeah, money. And what is connected to money is, of course, the brand in the television markets and what institutions are attractive to what conferences. So for right now, that's, of course, we talked Oklahoma, Texas, 1 year early to the SEC in 2024, as we predicted here at the Voice of College Football many times, even though the reports were 2025. And then, of course, San Diego State and SMU to the Pac-12, Fresno State still being bantied about, at least in the media, for the Pac-12. We missed our guy Jackson last night, and I felt horrible about that. So I am so happy and thankful that Jackson is here to talk some college football with us. Jackson, I'm sorry. I know that you were waiting forever last night and probably
Oh, that's
on to
okay,
someone
Mark.
else, but I'm just happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too, Mark. You know, the last time I made a guarantee that Clemson would win in the Orange Bowl, and I'm thinking probably shouldn't be making guarantees on social media, but I'm
Jackson,
probably gonna make that mistake.
you're a stand-up guy to put that out there, though. You know,
Oh, thank you,
that's a
man.
stand-up move right there, just to say, hey, I missed it. I'll remind everyone I missed it.
Yep. Well, I mean, when I get things right, I let everyone know it, and when I get things wrong, I let everyone know it. You gotta right your wrongs, Mark. So that's what I'm doing, right my wrongs. So, what do you think about this year? What's up, Johnny? Long time no see.
One scoop,
This,
just
huh?
one scoop, not two.
one,
Just one.
one scoop, Johnny. But yeah, Texas and Oklahoma, as of yesterday, they're officially heading over to the SEC starting in 2024, not in 2025. So BYU is going to be the only newcomer of the new Big 12 teams to have Texas and Oklahoma on their schedule, whereas Cincinnati only has Oklahoma. Houston has Texas, and Central Florida, I believe, has Oklahoma as well. So, what do you think about that, Mark?
The first thing I think about is that I love it. What I love about it is that when this was first announced, and both from the standpoint of OU Texas gone, and then just a few months later, okay, the Big 12's recovered and they're bringing in 4 new. My first thought was, to as long as we're keeping track of our records in terms of making these kind of predictions, number one is that I posted a video immediately to say these are the 4 schools that the Big 12 should go after, and they actually went after those 4. So there you go. So I hit it on that one because I thought they were the 4 best available. Okay. Next thought was, okay, Oklahoma and Texas leave at the same time that the other 4 come into the league, and it's going to be this smooth transition. They leave, they come in, same season, and there's no awkwardness. We got awkwardness, at least for one season. So I'm happy about that. I love it, because when is Oklahoma going to schedule Cincinnati? When is Texas going to schedule whoever they're playing, UCF? And when are all these teams going to schedule each other outside of the conference? Next to never. So at least we get matchups that we otherwise aren't going to see, at least for one season. So we get to see the 4 new against the 2 old, at least in certain matchups, even though they didn't cross all the matchups and integrate all those into the schedule. My other thought is I also enjoy the awkwardness of Oklahoma and Texas still being in the conference as lame ducks, and then the 4 new coming in, and who's going to win bragging rights. So the Big 12 has already survived 2 seasons since the announcement that those 2 were going to leave, and neither one of them has made a Big 12 championship game. If the Big 12 can make it through one more year, there's just going to be a little bit of chest pounding to say 3 full seasons, 6 spots in the Big 12 championship game, and neither one of you two clowns that are running for the money in the SEC could make our conference championship game, as opposed to the worst nightmare for the Big 12 would be Texas and Oklahoma would play in this year's Big 12 championship game.
Right. But I'll say this, though. When I found out that Texas and Oklahoma were officially heading over to the SEC, I could think of somebody that was pretty happy, Texas Tech, because last year is going to be the last matchup that Texas and Texas Tech play each other in Lubbock. Lubbock. That's right, because they're going to play each other in Austin, I believe, this year, and this is going to be the last matchup for a while that we know of. And what do you think about the impact that's going to have on the Bedlam rivalry between Oklahoma State?
I think it's devastating to it. I don't know that it's going to completely disappear, but I would anticipate that there's going to be some type of an agreement that they're going to play a home and home once a decade or something like that. I don't think it's that important for Oklahoma in its new, what is going to be its future home in the SEC, that it's really that important for them to play against Oklahoma State. I think it's more important for the Cowboys and their school to play Oklahoma and to try to keep that series alive. And it's a great series. It should be played, especially if the SEC does what it may do and go to a 9-game conference season, and there's only 3 non-conference games. Oklahoma is not going to allow itself to get tied down to a series with Oklahoma State, and then they've got no wiggle room to schedule another power. They're not going to schedule Oklahoma State and Michigan to play in 3 non-conference games. That would be brutal. So
sometimes you got to be a little brutal there, Oklahoma. You got to have a brutal non-con. That way people don't smack talk on you.
Well, they're going to be playing in the SEC as well.
True.
So they're not going to schedule that. So that's just a guess. That's a shot in the dark at what I think we can expect out of those two. An occasional series against each other. I don't think it's a Texas A&M situation where they basically looked at each other or didn't look at each other because they hate each other and they were okay with parting ways and there was a lot of bitterness and they didn't schedule a series and now they're going to be forced to play again. I don't think that's the case with these two, but they've just got different interests now.
Well, so with Texas joining the SEC, now we know that the Texas A&M rivalry is back next year. But what do you also think about the Texas-Arkansas rivalry coming back as a conference game?
I love it. I matched up, and I didn't really put my finishing touches on this, but I gave Arkansas, Texas A&M, and Missouri as their 3 common opponents that they will play every year, and I gave Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Arkansas.
There we go. So, even though Oklahoma doesn't really technically have a rival in the SEC besides Texas, so to speak, do you think they'll try to make Oklahoma, Arkansas sort of like a new rivalry, so to speak, because they kind of border one another?
They do. So, they do border one another, and don't forget about Oklahoma and Missouri.
Yeah, but I don't really think Missouri's a rival for Oklahoma. That's more on like the Missouri side.
Well, I get that, but they were rivals and did play in the same conference forever.
Oh yeah, the Big 8 and then the Big 12. I mean, it was only kind of like memorable when Missouri beat Oklahoma, like that 2010 game. Like, oh man, that was a fantastic game. Number 1 Oklahoma coming to Missouri's backyard, and then bam, Missouri upsets them.
So yeah, you're going to have that with certain rivalries or would-be rivalries, where it's so much more important for one side, but. I would expect I put Oklahoma with, okay, Texas, Missouri, and then here's kind of an odd one because
Okay.
you're going to have this situation. If the SEC goes to this situation, I gave them a scheduling format similar to what the ACC is doing, where they split up the conference and they give you 3 common opponents that you play every year, and then they split up the rest of the conference and you play those 2 groups of teams every other year. So it makes sure that you play everybody in the conference at least every other year.
Right.
So Oklahoma, I gave them Texas and Missouri, and here's a wild card because again, there's some placeholders that have to happen. Vandy, so I'm maybe working that one out, but I guess Vandy's got to play somebody. So anyway, definitely I got to think Texas and Missouri are going to be 2 for Oklahoma.
For sure. So this is something I was just thinking about, like for the rivalry week for the SEC, right?
And not to interrupt you here, Jackson, real quick, the truth says 355. So in the SEC, it's going to be 366 if they go to that format. So
Yeah.
355 in the ACC, 366. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Oh, it's okay, man. No worries, man. It's always good to talk with the chat. Poor Vandy. Oh man, I feel bad for them already. But this is what I was thinking about. Now we know Ole Miss, Mississippi State are going to play each other on rivalry week. Texas A&M should be back on rivalry week. I guess are they going to do like Arkansas, Missouri, or are they going to go back to LSU, Arkansas on Black Friday, or is it just going to be, that's going to be kind of a squiggly line we got to figure out.
It is. So the SEC is going to have to figure out if it's important for them and important for Oklahoma to have a final game rival.
Yeah,
Otherwise, if it stays Arkansas, Missouri, and it stays or goes to Texas A&M as it used to be, then Oklahoma's just kind of hanging out there. And, some conferences are like that. Look at the ACC. A number of their teams play a rival the final weekend of the season, North Carolina State. Obviously, the ACC and the SEC games outside the conference. And then they kind of get into this issue where they don't have a rival for everyone. And so BC, Syracuse, Pitt, Miami, Duke are just kind of out there on the final weekend, which intrigues me. And also, I think it's a mistake by the Big 12 this season. If you look at their final weekend, it's just this random set of games.
Oh yeah, BYU, Oklahoma State. That's going to be a memorable rivalry game. And Cincinnati, Kansas. Oh, that's going to be fun.
Send out Oklahoma playing its rival in Bedlam, the last game in the history of the conference.
Oh man. But I guess Houston, Central Florida is a game for rivalry week to remember. That's so funny.
Well, they have to figure something out there because UCF's kind of in the same place that you just placed Oklahoma. What are they going to do with UCF on the final weekend of the season? Are they going to try to build something there? Do they pair them up with? I would think they would go West Virginia, Cincinnati as a rivalry on the final weekend of the season, but they didn't do that this fall, at least.
Yeah.
Or do you say UCF? We're going to make 2 of the newbies rivals because they've already established that in the American Conference, UCF Houston or UCF Cincinnati, but they didn't schedule that. I really don't know what they were thinking with this schedule.
Who knows? I mean, I think they're just kind of winging it, just like, oh, well, we're just going to do this game, that game, this game, that game. Which one or that one or this one or that one? I know that Iowa State, Kansas State's going to be on rivalry week.
Yeah.
Oklahoma, TCU on Black Friday. How about that one?
Nice.
I mean, that's something.
Wait a minute. We've got Oklahoma and TCU?
Yeah, that's on Black Friday alongside Texas Tech on Black Friday. So,
all right.
Talk about a doubleheader.
The way I would have approached it is I would have thought, okay, we're not going to screw Oklahoma and Texas. We're not going to be, and everybody was waiting for that, the schedule to come out and see, is the Big 12 going to try to screw Oklahoma and Texas? And for the most part, they didn't. But I'm glad that they at least mixed them in with the other 4 teams, the new teams, because those are the games I want to see.
Yeah.
But I would have taken the approach, if I were the Big 12, to say, what is best for our conference and what is best for our conference moving forward? Well, we're going to already work on what we want rivalry weekend to look like going forward. And wherever Oklahoma and Texas, if it ends up Texas has to play BYU and Oklahoma has to play West Virginia in the final week, whatever it is, that's just going to be the way it's going to be. We don't really care about accommodating those two. We're going to put our vision into play for the future. But they didn't do that. Unless
Right.
their vision for the future is just to throw darts at a wall and have this random schedule.
So 2022 is going to be the last time Texas, Oklahoma State have played each other as conference opponents. No Texas, Oklahoma State this year. There's not going to be Oklahoma, Kansas State. We know that. No Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. That's the one that really weirds me out. Because I mean, aren't you going to try to make those two rivals? Big 12. I got some questions.
So, how many Texas schools do we have?
Oh, there's 5 right now, but there's going to be 4 in the Big 12.
Yeah, when we go ahead. Okay. Well, do you consider Baylor and TCU to be each other's biggest rival? Then maybe that's a final game of the season.
Sure, why not? They should be, but instead they're going to play each other on the week before rivalry week. TCU, well, Baylor's going to play West Virginia on Thanksgiving week, rivalry week. Once again, I guess the Big 12 was just winging it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and Texas Tech, Houston, I don't get why they don't have them on rivalry week, but oh well. But, it's like you said, they got to find somebody to play for Central Florida.
Yeah, they just can't leave those teams out. Like, if they're going to make a big deal out of rivalry weekend, like every other conference does, so I would hope that they would as well, they can't. It's a difficult process because they don't have a pairing for everyone. It's not the Big Ten. The Big Ten basically is good to go. The SEC is good to go. But for the Big 12, there's no perfect, because there's not a pairing for UCF. There's maybe a pairing for Cincinnati with West Virginia if you want to make that something, but there's not a pairing for BYU. There's not a pairing for UCF. They've turned themselves into a national conference. So for rivalry weekend, somebody's got to be left out.
Yeah.
In multiple teams, probably. So I think they need to determine what are our priorities for rivalry weekend, and then the rest of it we can build out year to year. But do we believe that Houston and TCU, or Houston and Texas Tech, or TCU and Baylor, or pick your game, Kansas State, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Kansas, they're playing that earlier and not later in the season. Or I think that's the second to the last week of the season.
Yeah, Kansas State's on the second to last week. So that'll be a fun game. But, it's going to be really exciting to see these upcoming games in the season. It's always fun to talk about college football when there's not very many news involving college. Great Oreo.
The Great Oreo Challenge, Jackson, is coming soon.
Oh, is that where you eat like 40 Oreos in a row?
We'll find out.
I don't think I can be able to eat them, unfortunately, because they got wheat and dairy. So
we'll find out what that's all about.
Oh.
It is coming soon. That's what I want everyone to know. It's coming soon.
For sure. I'll keep an eye on it. That's for sure.
Yeah, we will sound the alarm. Everyone will know.
Yeah.
All right, Jackson. How is everything else going?
Oh, everything's going on.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Man, I've had this issue recently. Hopefully I'm coming back. Am I here?
No.
I think I'm here.
You are, but now you're doing robot voice. Goes, "Oop, oop, 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 oop."
Can
And you're frozen.
everyone see me and hear me? Let
You
me
are
know.
unfrozen. You are in the future. The future is full of silver coins. And you're
This
frozen.
has happened, unfortunately, far too often in the
Oh
last few
man.
days.
I am so sorry you've been dealing with that, man. Mm. But you are in the
Hmm.
future and it's full of silver coins. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. What is happening? Well, uh,
I made it back, Jackson. Thank you for holding down the fort.
oh,
I
you're
can only
welcome.
apologize and let everyone know that, yeah, the internet went down, but hopefully we're back to stay.
Um,
All right,
well,
Jackson. Anything else?
I just wanted to talk about, Texas, Oklahoma, and some of the future games that are going to be coming up with the SEC. Texas LSU. We're finally going to get that game brought back for a little bit. That'll be fun. So I'm just happy about some of the upcoming games on there. And thank you for having me on today, Mark. And the future is full of silver coins. Uh, Mark, you okay? Oh, I hope I'm not trying to run the show, but uh, this is Mark's show. Oh, but yeah, I guess I'm holding down the fort again. Uh, yeah, the Great Oreo Challenge is coming soon. It's going to be really fun. I don't know what the Great Oreo Challenge is, but it's probably a bunch of Oreos.
Jackson's back here hosting. Jackson, thank you. I hope you don't have to do this again, but I'm glad that you stayed up.
Um, you're welcome. Let's see.
Am I back?
You're
Let me
back
know if
for
I'm
now.
back.
You're back for now. That internet is acting bad.
Can everybody hear me? See me? Hello,
Ooh.
hello.
The future is full of silver coins and gold coins. You're in the gold rush.
Can
Ooh.
everybody see and hear me? I guess not.
Well, I can
We
hear
got
you.
Dr. C on the line. Dr. C, I don't even know if everyone can see and hear us. Can you hear me? Hello, Dr. C. Guess
I
not.
hope his internet's okay.
All right. Hello, everyone. I guess I'm back. I don't know how long I'm going to stay. This seems to be a huge
Uh,
issue here. All right, Jackson. Appreciate you being here.
Thank
And
you for having
we're
me
going to
on,
move on
Mark.
to
I
our
hope
next
your
person here.
internet's going well and stay safe and stay warm. Stay away from the cold.
Well, we will do our best. That's kind of difficult to do this time of year, but we will do our best. You do the same there, Jackson.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, man, the internet not liking the voice of college football tonight. Everybody call up Spectrum. They are the internet provider that's not coming through for us tonight. Guess I can institute maybe some internet backups if this continues. We had this issue the other night, like my internet forever. I guess that's the one good thing about living in Connecticut, that the internet was really good. Never let me down for years and years and years and years. And here we are, like the second time this week, that the freaking internet has let us down. All right. Hopefully, we're good to go and we're going strong here. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. When your business depends on the internet, though, can't have this go on. What's going on tonight?
Mark, I doubt you watch much college basketball these days.
Zero.
But the Big 12 played the SEC a few weeks ago.
Okay.
And TCU lost to Mississippi State. And in the final 30 seconds of the game, what do you think Mississippi State chanted?
I'm guessing they went to a familiar 3-letter chant that I've heard many times. SEC.
Yeah. How long do you think it is before Oklahoma and Texas friends start joining in on the chant?
Well, I think that for one thing, they're not going to be playing until 2024. They've been geared up for this for 2021, the summer of 21. So for over 3 years, those fan bases are anticipating this. So I think they're going to be more in that SEC mindset than they would have been normally. Also, I got to think that the SEC being the premier conference in college football, I can't speak to the other sports, but in college football, it would be a welcome chant for Texas and Oklahoma fans to take on. I would think that they would embrace it.
Yeah. Do you think there's any chance this year as a way to troll their opponents?
Yeah.
If they're on the road or something like that, they just break out the SEC. SEC.
That would be funny. Because you've taken it a step further, and I like this, because my initial thought when you brought this up was that when they joined the SEC, like if from the very first game of the season, first drive of the, like, I would indoctrinate my fan base if I'm Oklahoma or Texas to start the SEC chant and just kind of annoy the rest of the league. Like, well, you're really not, because there are going to be tons of fans out there from other fan bases, because we've witnessed it with other conferences, and it's going to be even more pronounced in the SEC, that won't look at those two schools and those two teams as truly SEC teams until somewhere down the line, year 2, 4, 5, whenever it is. There are going to be certain people that are going to be, well, they're still kind of outsiders.
Oh yeah, and that's exactly right. And let me give some advice, if I can, to the Oklahoma and Texas fans out there. There was this team in 2012, Mark, called Missouri.
Yeah.
Missouri won the SEC in back-to-back years or something like that. And their players
they had a rough first year, then they won it back-to-back. Yes.
Right. Well, their players started trash talking the SEC, saying it was a soft conference and all that stuff. Hasn't gone well for them since. So don't trash talk the SEC, because if you do that, we will attack our own.
It hasn't gone well, but it's not like they've been the doormat of the league. They've
been next to the doormat, though. They're the doormat stopper,
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing saving them is Vanderbilt.
Missouri really wasn't most years that good in the Big 12. They were good. They were okay. They went to bowl games.
Yeah, but that doesn't change the fact of what they decided to do. They thought they came into the SEC, they happened to win a few years in a row, and they thought they would just run roughshod on the conference.
Well, I don't know so much that they thought that, or some of their players that are now like 30 years old thought that.
It doesn't, Mark. Those players are a representation of their university. So, and if it's being said out in public, imagine what the talk was in the locker room.
Oh, sure. Well, that's how people at that age operate. They don't really have much forward thinking, or they act in the moment and they think, okay, this was easy. We won a game. We'll do this all the time. We beat them down today, so this is always going to happen. They don't really have a lot of awareness, or you know where I'm going. So
Maturity.
maturity wasn't the word I was looking for, but that's certainly part of it. Yes,
I see you got a super chat there, Mark.
we do.
What's it say?
Well, you can see if you would like to respond to this as well. Lee, thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate your contribution, sir. Big 12 did a little screw job on Texas, Oklahoma. Texas plays at Iowa State late November, then turns around in a shortened week and play Texas Tech. Same for OU. OU travels to Provo. Texas then plays TCU.
Okay. Now, is that just happen to be special cases for those two teams? Or does every team get a situation like that?
Exactly. I can't answer that. That doesn't seem that egregious to me. And again, I didn't see this schedule as some big screw job on Texas and Oklahoma. And I have no issue with the Big 12 trying to create a fair schedule. That's what they should do. And then saying, okay, if we need to make certain accommodations, schedule building is not easy for an entire conference when you take into consideration all the travel and take into consideration Thursday and Friday games. So it's not easy to put together. So I have all the respect in the world for the Big 12 if their number one priority was to build a fair schedule, but number two, say, if we do have to cut some corners and make some accommodations, we're not going to make them for Texas and Oklahoma. We're going to make them for the teams that are going to be here long term.
Yeah, I thought the worst schedule, or one of the worst schedules, was West Virginia, because those guys, poor guys, got to play 5 road games in conference.
Well, everybody plays either 5 or 4.
Yeah, but the fact
Except
of
for
their
Texas
travel
and
distance
Oklahoma.
is also pretty far.
Yeah, but they just alternate that.
Okay, that's fair.
They just alternate that every year. And that's the same in the Big 10 since they play 9. And I got to think in the Pac-12 that they accommodate that every other year for every team.
Yeah. It's nice, Mark. You get to talk about the little conferences like the Pac-12 and the Big 12 in these types of conversations. Honestly, Mark, let's just name them the G8. There isn't a G5 anymore. It's the G8. The SEC's 1. The Big 10 is 2. Then you got everybody else. And that's where we're at.
Well,
I know with academics and stuff, they're technically in the Power 5 still, but I'm talking about from a sports perspective exclusively.
You're talking from a football perspective.
Well, mainly football, yes.
Yeah.
Which is by far the biggest revenue sport.
Yeah. Well, I have some level of hope that the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and the ACC will continue to be some level of factor. Their champions are at least going to be in the playoff, and their second place teams should be in the playoff as well. So they'll be represented. Now we'll see 10 years down the road if the aggregate playoff record of the Big 12 is 2-14 and the Pac-12 is similar.
Yeah, 2-14 might be giving it a little bit kind to these people. I mean, to be Oklahoma, let's assume the Lincoln Riley years is what they return to, okay?
Yeah.
Because that's where they've been. They're a great program.
Yeah.
They just happen to have it down here. Oklahoma could be the 3rd best team in the SEC and would be significantly better, I believe, than any Pac-12 team or any ACC team or any Big 12 team.
So you're taking Oklahoma circa Lincoln Riley 2017, next 3 seasons. Oregon can challenge them. Washington can challenge them on occasion. And again, you're taking Oklahoma at its peak.
Well, Bob Stoops' years, they were pretty good under them.
Absolutely.
So it's not like it was just a 5-year blip with one head coach. They left and now they're back to 6-6. I think there is a difference there. I like LBC Trojan's comment that I was talking about maturity, lecturing Missouri players, and 5 minutes later uses a broad brush calling other conferences the G8. Well, listen, I'm sorry that all the talent is in basically 2 conferences. I'm sorry, I can't help that. That's not my problem.
Your take on all of this, I think, is generally on the mark. I do think that it's a bit extreme, and we will see how it plays out. It would be fascinating to know right this second, what are the playoff records going to be for, and the non-conference records going to be for these 5 conferences for the next 10 years. We will have to just wait and see how this all plays out, because what's great, another great thing about, for people that like to compare conferences, once we get to this expanded playoff, is there are going to be many more games that are going to be extremely, of course, meaningful, that there can't be an excuse made about opt-outs or anything else. It's a playoff game that we are going to be able to judge the best teams in these conferences playing each other.
Right. And the question is, do you think to me, the playoffs hyper focuses the talent gap?
Yes.
And outside of Oregon, I just don't see any team that's getting the talent year in and year out. Clemson used to be there, but they've fallen off recently. To where they can even be competitive.
Clemson even off of the Oregon line?
Even Michigan. What did Michigan finish in recruiting this year? Like 18th or something like that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's not talented enough to win the national championship.
No.
I don't think USC could do it at 8th. But what did the Oregon finish, 5th?
Something like that. I think Ohio State was 5th. They might have been 7th.
Okay. Well, then maybe Oregon can't even do it.
No, I think they were 6. I don't know. I could pull it up. Regardless, they were somewhere in that range.
Right. But there's just a talent gap. And it's going to show up on the field in the first round of these playoff games. Now, the only way I could see it is if instead of playoff games are treated more like regular season games, because you have to play one after another.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a gauntlet. Instead of you can hyper focus on for a month. Because I think the duration of time between the end of the post conference championship week and the playoffs is why these scores are out of whack.
And also the multi-layer playoff system, I think, is going to accentuate the teams that are extremely talented and deep.
Oh, yeah. We saw that with Georgia TCU.
Yeah, boy.
I mean, you could have Georgia's 4th stringers in, and they probably beat TCU pretty comfortably.
We are going to have, for anybody out there that's a ardent backer of the 12-team playoff, I am generally speaking, just because it's an expanded playoff that includes all the conferences. I don't like the 12 teams. There are a lot of holes that we have punched through this playoff structure ever since it was announced. So I don't completely like it, but I do like the inclusion. But we're going to watch some really bad football. We're going to watch some really good games. The 7-10 game, the 8-9 game in the first round should be really good contests, but we're going to see some clunkers. We're going to see more of what we've seen during the 14 playoff.
Oh, yeah. The second round is going to be pretty brutal, I believe. You're going to have Georgia play either Tennessee or Kansas State, Ohio State, Clemson, or, yeah, it would probably been Ohio State. TCU most likely against Utah.
What's
then
wrong
probably
with TCU
Alabama
and Utah?
Huh?
What's wrong with TCU and Utah?
TCU was just much better than Utah.
Oh, I think that would be a competitive game.
No.
Who did TCU blow out this year?
They didn't blow out.
They couldn't blow out Oklahoma State or Texas Tech or Texas or anybody.
Well, I think they would have blown out Tulane.
I don't know about that.
You don't think they would have beat Tulane, blown them out?
No.
By like 21 plus?
I don't think so.
Oh.
Kansas State didn't. They lost. USC lost.
Yeah, but is that a elevation of Tulane or indictment on those schools?
It's a little bit of both, but TCU played with those schools and lost to one of them.
Yeah, but they also had to rematch them for the conference championship game after beating them.
Yeah, and they barely beat them.
Well, wasn't that the game they lost their quarterback?
Kansas State did.
Oh, Kansas State was the team though. I thought it was TCU.
No, Kansas State lost its starting quarterback and lost the backup quarterback. So basically, it comes down to this. You are in the camp that the SEC is not only the best at the top, it's the best for 4 or 5 rungs, if not the entire conference. But what's important here are 4 or 5 rungs at the top. SEC detractors can't, obviously, nobody can debate that the best teams in the country come from the SEC. We can't even debate that. So the next debate out of SEC haters is that everybody focuses on Georgia and Alabama, and they carry the conference. And when this playoff expands, and we've got to see 3 or 4 SEC teams, well, then we're going to see that other teams from other conferences can play with those teams. We shall see.
Right. I mean, there's a legitimate case, and I know this is going to sound exaggeration, Mark, but I think it could be happen where Alabama's the 6th best team in the SEC results-wise.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
No, I don't think it. I think it could happen. I think it's realistic. If you look at realistic possibilities, Alabama being 6th is not that far off.
We're talking about this fall?
Not this fall. Once Oklahoma and Texas get at it.
Well, sure, all sorts of things could happen.
Yeah, but how many conferences could that even happen where Alabama is the 6th best team based on the results? It's basically zero. It is zero.
I guess the new Big Ten.
Maybe.
Why can't Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, USC, and Wisconsin be better than Alabama? Just why can't that be as possible as Georgia, Tennessee, LSU, Texas A&M, and Florida being better than, or Oklahoma and Texas, whoever you want to slot in there, being better than Alabama?
I mean, to me, yeah, I think Texas and Oklahoma have the recruiting edge over Wisconsin.
Sure.
I think 5th, but for 6th for Alabama, that'd be a struggle, Mark. But Oklahoma and Texas fans, welcome to the SEC. You know, they're going to get scrutinized. Everything they do is going to get scrutinized at a different level now, Mark, because they're in the SEC going forward. That's how it works, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
all eyes are going to be on whether they can compete in this conference.
Yeah. So to my Oklahoma and Texas fans out there, SEC.
I got to say that I enjoyed the front half of that conversation more so just because I thought it that it will be interesting just to see how the fan bases respond, and it would be a bit. I will just sit back. I don't have a stake in it. I don't have a claim in it, so I could care less in terms of my own rooting interest and so forth. But just to kind of kick back and, number one, see how Oklahoma and Texas, can they take the league by storm, or, as probably most of college football nation believes, they're going to get their heads beat in. And number two, again, I would embrace that. If I was Oklahoma and Texas, I would go on a campaign through the student body, and I would say, we want that chant at our games immediately. And we want to be the first team if we're Texas and we're playing Tennessee week 1, we want to chant that before they chant it. We want to chant it first. Well, nobody's going to chant it. Did we ever hear this at an SEC game, the SEC chant? I think not, because they're 2 SEC teams. But I would chant this if I was Texas or Oklahoma at an SEC game against an SEC opponent. All right, let's get to our next call right here at the Voice of College Football. We got ADB on the line. Randy, how you doing?
I'm doing well tonight. This is a fun one. I like it. I was happy when I looked on my notifications earlier today and saw that we were going to get a little bit deeper into the Oklahoma-Texas thing.
I am happy when people are happy to see our notifications here.
Well, if I've learned anything, I've learned that this long off season is made shorter when you can talk about college football all the time.
I like it.
So I don't know. I with the news just breaking last night, I was bouncing around a couple of different places, and I think last night I mentioned some information about the recruiting budget that the news broke yesterday about what schools spent and stuff like that, and also the SEC revenue distribution across the conference.
Yeah.
And I started putting those two things together and thinking about the fact that Oklahoma and Texas, there's a litany of reasons that they might have wanted to go ahead and jump, right? Television money, those sorts of things. And it just made too much sense not to. But with that move, regardless of what the Big 12 does going forward, I kept coming back to this question about whether or not once Oklahoma and Texas leave, will the Big 12 ever win another national title in football? And at first, that may sound a little bold, but when I wrap it in with the numbers on recruiting and revenue sharing and television deals moving forward and that sort of thing, it's hard to see how any of those schools are going to be able to keep pace. And I'm not casting this net out to the Big 10 or to the Pac-12 yet, because honestly, I haven't thought about it. I just thought about the Big 12 since that was the news of the day. But I don't know. To me, that looks like a hard bargain if you're moving forward, because just to rehash the news, I mean, Georgia spent $4.5 million in this last recruiting cycle. That's a full 1/3 more than the closest school spent, which was Texas A&M. They came in at just under $3 million. The league dispensed about $50 million to each of its members yesterday, or recently. It was announced yesterday. That number, when the new television deal hits, could get north of $85 million per school, depending on how things shake out. Football is all about, especially college football, is all about talent acquisition, right? So essentially, it's like if you have a big business, you are just getting your product together to go do business with that product. I know it's kind of a barbaric way to look at it, but it's about talent acquisition. So UGA, back-to-back national titles, they've been making this level of investment for the last 5 years, something in the ballpark of this. That's not going to stop. That level of investment is only going to increase because recruiting is about marketing. Now, the school, the city, there's plenty to market. But when a kid comes on campus for an official visit, what they're being shown and how they're being handled is buoyed by that revenue, that recruiting budget. If that's only going to increase, given that they're currently only spending in the ballpark of, say, 3% of the entire athletic department's budget on recruiting, and that budget's going to increase, it's logical to think that that recruiting budget is also just going to scale with it. If they're already this far out in front, and the majority of the national championships for the last 20 years have been won by teams in the Sun Belt, I don't know. It's just hard for me to see how those schools are going to be able to keep up, because everything is driven by the money. I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you have any. I may be off base here, but I don't think I am.
No, I don't think you're off base at all. And just to further one of your points, the more income you have, the more disposable income you have, whether that's privately or corporately. And that's not even from a percentage standpoint, because it only costs so much money, whatever that figure is, to operate. So, for example, if you run your household on $50,000 and you're just making it, let's say you're doing fine, but you're just making it and you pay the bills and you're fine. And you have $100 to spend in dining per month. Well, if you double that to 100,000, well, those people, they don't necessarily are in a position only to spend $200 in dining per month just because they make twice as much money. No, all their basic, their utilities, it costs the same amount of money, maybe roughly to run the water and to heat the house and da. No, they have. So the more you can spend on items like recruiting, you would think. And yes, to your point, look at Oklahoma and Texas moving to the SEC. When is the last other program in the Big 12 won a national championship? I don't know who that is off the top of my head. I know TCU won one in 1938, and I know the teams have won them since then. Kansas State's never won one. Anyway, I'm not going to sit here and try to figure that out, but basically none of them have won national championships. Now, we just saw TCU come close technically to winning a national championship. I don't know how close they really came, but anyway, they were in the national championship game. We saw Kansas State under Bill Snyder take a few shots and come close in the BCS system to getting in the national championship game. But they were operating on a much closer scale to everybody else during those times. And that's non-existent now, and it's going to become even more difficult to overcome in the future. As soon as Oklahoma and Texas took off, my response when asked was the Big 12 is going to be a really good conference. It's going to be a really fun conference to keep track of. And if you love competitive football, you're not watching Ohio State Rutgers kind of games. You're not watching Bama Vandy kind of games. You don't really have those kind of games in this. It's going to be a fun conference. I don't know. I guess either Iowa State or West Virginia or one of these four that are just coming into the league are the worst teams in the league, but there's not a whole lot of difference between any of them on a given year. So it's going to be fun, but we're all focused on the playoff and the quest for a national championship, and they don't have anything up there until proven otherwise. And I'm not expecting to be proven otherwise. There's nothing there.
I would agree with you. Again, I didn't say they wouldn't make the playoff. I didn't say that wouldn't be a great league. I'm with you. I think the Big 12 is going to be a whole lot of fun to watch. But if Oklahoma and Texas consider themselves national championship contenders, then this move only makes sense for them. Full stop, right? They have to get into the game. Now, how they do in the conference, we'll see. I think I saw someone said they're eventually going to run the SEC, Texas or someone. Listen, they can't even run the Big 12. So I'd maybe pump the brakes on that one just a little bit. But we will see. I don't know. I think I've made the point in the chat recently over the last few live casts that bottom line is there are only a handful of teams across the country that are willing to pay the price to compete for national championships in this new environment. And that's just the cold, hard reality of it. That doesn't mean that you can't have a great season, a great fall, have a wonderful championship, win a bowl game, all those things. And if you love the game of football, then all of those things really matter. If you're an alumnus of a school, then those things really matter for pride and everything else. That's who I am. I value those games. But on the whole, people are caring about the playoff. They're caring about the national title these days. The world has shifted. This is where we are. And I just don't think that let's make the number huge and say 10. There may be 10 schools that are willing to make the level of investment necessary to compete when the arms race is what it is. The rent is very high in the SEC. It just is. Now, there's more to it. There's development of players. There's a billion other factors that are in there. But keep in mind that these numbers I threw out earlier, that doesn't have anything to do with local media revenue that's generated by the program. It doesn't have anything to do with NIL. It doesn't have anything to do with any of those peripheral
Merchandise.
Things. Right. None of that.
Gear.
Right. So all these things, it's like the snowball going downhill, right? It just you win up, right? You level up every time you win, and you win every time you level up. That's just how it is. So I just wasn't sure because I in no way am I sitting here trying to beat my SEC chest and say, that league's dominant and nobody else has a chance and so on. Not at all. I'm just saying logistically, it doesn't appear that the group that are actually going to be contending for that national title is going to be very large. And I just didn't know. I don't think that the Big 12 in its new form has a viable shot to win that national title. Because if it's not Georgia, if it's not Alabama, you're looking at a Clemson. Maybe it's a Florida State that rises up in the ACC, who has that confluence of talent and money and whatever it is. But again, I think that group of teams is very small. So I say enjoy the fall, enjoy your team, cheer loudly, right? And just get used to enjoying football again. And don't kill yourself by saying that it's championship or bust. Because as a Georgia fan, I mean, I'm 46. I watched Herschel play. I saw Georgia win it back in 1980, but it was a long time. Me in the stands as an undergrad, right? There's a long period there where Georgia was 8 wins. Coach Rick shows up. We get to 10, 11. Very good program. But the investment changed when Coach Smart got there. And he demanded that it change, or he wouldn't have been there. He got a promise for yes. He leveled up, and you're seeing the results right now.
So Wet Blanket makes the comment here, and Wet Blanket, we respect you as an Oklahoma State fan, and certainly I don't want to pile on the Big 12, but makes the point here. Every year, a Big 12 team will have a playoff bye every year. Okay, here's the deal, though, Wet Blanket. The Big 12 has made 5 of the 9 playoffs thus far in the current format of 4 teams. They've lost all 5 games and only needed to win 1 game to get to a national championship game, and then of course win 2 to win the whole thing. They were 0-4. They won, of course, with TCU. They're 1-5 in playoff games. Okay, think about this. Kansas State won the Big 12 this past year. They would get the bye, and they would then have to win 3 games. And I don't have the bracket and what it would be in front of me, but it would be something to the effect of Tennessee, Ohio State, and Georgia, or something. Like, it's just daunting. It's just to go through those 3 type of teams, 3 consecutive weeks. Yeah, it's going to be more difficult. Yes, there's going to be more opportunity, but it's going to be more difficult once you get in. You're going to have a lot of playoff appearances, but I just don't see those kind of schools winning against those kind of schools over and over and over.
And that's what it comes back to about the playoff. Are you going to champion the opportunity? If so, you're going to get that with those 12 teams. I still think that obviously the Final Four are going to look very, very similar to what they have looked. And that is, you're going to have the same group that are going to be willing to make those investments to stay up there or continue to push into that elite tier. And I mean, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right? But I was in school with Coach Smart. Okay, we rode the bus. Him and Bobo and me, we were on the bus together. They'd hop off at the football facility. So I'm just saying, as long as he's there, okay, if nothing tragic happens, the man is there for a while. None of the way he goes about business is going to change. So that means that if there's more money available, carve out that 3% of this huge number. We're going to push it right back into the product, just like any good business person's going to do. And he's going to drive this train forward. Now, again, I'm not arguing anything here other than the fact that if you're going to compete, you got to commit. Every school has a different level of what that means. And I see the comment that's popped up there. I don't disagree with that comment right there. UGA is on a great run. Absolutely. Well, I think the question becomes, when do you start to count, right? Do you start to count in 16, 17? When do you start that count? I think there was a lot of talk of dynasty and all that kind of stuff. I'm not someone who subscribes to that at this point, as far as Georgia's concerned. I think they are an elite program right now. I think for where they were last year, where they are right now, the way they go about their business, it's completely fair to say that they are the standard for how to run things right now. Now, can that change next year? Absolutely. Alabama's still Alabama. They're not going anywhere. There are other still teams out there. Ohio State is a program that has the potential to do it. The Pac-12, I don't know. I might look at Oregon potentially in the future, USC potentially in the future, in the next 5 years. I'm not throwing dirt on Clemson yet. I really do believe that they are going to have a hard time getting back to where they were. I'm not casting, them aside completely, though. So there are teams that can still dent this run. Now, each of us gets to decide what we think a dynasty is.
Yes.
I mean, there are no parameters on that. But if you take a 5-year or 6-year window, any team wins 3 titles or something like that in that window, there you go. Like if you spin it forward 20 years and you think back on this run that Georgia's had, would you say that was a dynastic team? I would not at this point. I would not say that. If Georgia wins it in 23 or maybe 24, based on the fact that they're still winning 12 games every year, they're in the playoff, they win the East, or not the East going forward, but if they have a shot to win the conference, right? If they rack up another title or 2 there, I don't think it's a reach to say that that was a dynasty. I mean, we all lived through Pete Carroll and USC in the early 2000s. When I think back on that, Georgia has done what USC did then. 2 titles, multiple seasons of 11, 12 wins. There's not a whole lot of difference right there. I thought that USC team, now I was younger, so I was highly influenced by what I was watching. But I thought that team at moments looked invincible. Those teams, that window of teams from say 03 to 06, 7, you look in there and you're like, that team looks like a dynasty to me. When I think back on it, they were what I think of in the early 2000s. So I don't know. I think that's a fair way to judge it too, is what's the window? And when you look back on it, is that who you think about?
Well, this conversation started out as a conference conversation and what conferences would be able to compete for a national championship. So it kind of drifted into a Georgia conversation, but going back to the conference portion of things, that's fine. But going back to the conference portion of things and Big 12 supporters trying to make a case for their chances in all of this, the thing is that Georgia's the best program in college football right now. They're the best team in college football. They've stockpiled the best talent along with Alabama than anyone in college football. But do they have 8-4 and 9-3 seasons ahead of them? Well, obviously at some point they do, whether that's under Kirby Smart or the next coach. The thing is about the SEC is that there's layer upon layer upon layer. When Georgia falters, there's going to be LSU, Tennessee, Texas, Oklahoma, Alabama, Auburn. Don't forget about them. They could come back at some point. They've got a great tradition. They've got all the, there's Texas A&M. There's all sorts of Florida to catch anybody. Somebody's going to be down. Somebody's always going to be down. They all play each other. So regardless of how well they recruit, somebody's got to lose the games. But there's just so many layers of programs that have the resources, the facilities, and the desire and the know-how to win. And it's important to them. There's like 10 of them. There's really Vandy at the bottom. And then I guess Missouri is probably, they recruit. They from a recruiting standpoint and a resources standpoint, South Carolina, there's not Ole Miss, Mississippi State, but those are really good programs with really good teams. There's just not anything at the bottom. Like it's 10 or 12 deep.
I think that's fair. But I mean, even a school like Missouri, what was it? They're just 2 years removed from a top 30, I think or maybe a top 20 recruiting class, which was a big deal for them out there in Middle Earth. Like that's a big deal. So I don't know. This is year 4 for Drinkwitz, and I think it's just one of those things where maybe we'll see some kick out of them this year. But getting me to talk about that game in this past season is a whole conversation on its own. So I'm going to walk away from Missouri, but that's okay. I think I come off, but the numbers I just don't see the trajectory changing, right? Barring some drastic shift in leadership at the University of Georgia and at the various schools inside the conference, because to your point, Auburn is not that far away from being, revived and coming right back and competing. Alabama hasn't gone anywhere. If Georgia were to fall off, who's going to beat them? That squad, if it's Tennessee or Florida, whoever it is going to be one of the best 4 or 5 teams in the country. They just will be. So again, I think it just comes back to commitment, right? And who is willing. And it's like the conversation the other day around who's going to join which conference and conference realignment. The conferences want the complete package. They get to choose who they want to be around. So each of these schools get to choose in a smaller version here, whether or not they value the input, to actually compete on a national level. Do they believe that the ROI is big enough? Having been a Georgia fan my entire life, I can tell you that it is worth it, right? If you can pull it together, get the magic mix, the right coach, the full support, all those things, the return on investment is absolutely worth it, because the number of enrollments you hear in press releases from the University of Georgia president, from the AD, from everyone in the football facilities, enrollment is up across the board. Academics are up across the board. Everyone's pulling in the same direction. And they know what the goal is. They believe that whatever they're getting, the exposure they're getting for the football team being on the national stage the way they are, is worth it to make those investments. And I just don't see those things changing anytime soon. And Georgia is not alone in the SEC in that regard.
Yep.
So
thanks for being here, Randy. I appreciate it.
No, hey, I'm glad you had me on. Didn't mean to take so much time. Didn't plan to, but I'm glad we had a good conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate your
Have
call.
a good evening.
Have a good one. Yeah, Georgia is they are pouring the money into it, and good for them. They're not only pouring the money into it and the resources into it, because that's being done elsewhere to different degrees. Miami's wasting what they have poured into their Texas for years and years and years. They haven't been anything since 2009 for the most part on the national level, pouring into it and not reaping the benefits, not seeing so it's not all about money. You have to have the money. It's like having the players. It's not all about the players. You have to have the players. You got to start with the players, but you got to do something with them. You got to be able to coach and develop and keep them in line and put it all together. With the money, it's the same thing. Just pouring a ton of money into the football program is not going to solve the problem. You got to have capable people and capable leadership. Now, to one point I'll make before, we did have a couple callers lined up. So I did see a few people asking in the chat. I've dropped the link several times in the chat. Just grab it and I will drop it in there again. Join the show. So there's a difference between who can make the playoff and who can win a national championship. And maybe that's where some people have a disconnect. So currently we've got 4 spots and we've got a national champion. There are all sorts of programs that we could name that have a legitimate shot to make one of those 4 spots. That pool is going to broaden not considerably. See, this is the thing, is that the programs that are capable of going to the playoff now, I don't think that's going to expand much. Even though we've got 8 more spots, they're just going to be able to do it more often. Like, can Penn State make a playoff now? Yeah, they could. They could win the Big Ten championship this year. They are good enough to win the Big Ten championship if coached well and they get the right breaks and pull it all together. Penn State can go to the playoff in a 14 playoff. Well, they're obviously going to have a better chance to do it in the 12 team and will probably get it accomplished at some point, but they could do it in the 14. Michigan finally broke through and made the 14. Had this 12-team playoff come out earlier, we wouldn't have known. Could Michigan make a 14 playoff? Because for a long time, it looked like they were kind of in that place of 9-3, 10-2, can't win enough games to get to the playoff, can't beat the right team to get to the playoff. Oregon. Can Oregon make a playoff? Well, they made the first one, so there are the resources there and the ability to get there, and they've come close most recently under Mario Cristobal. So Oregon, you put them in that bucket of making the 14 playoff. But they will have more opportunity. So I don't think we will necessarily, outside of the group of 5, be able to name many programs that would be able to make a 12-team playoff that couldn't make a 4-team playoff. But obviously more of them will on a more regular basis because the spots are open. But name me a team that will be able to make this 12-team playoff that couldn't make the 4-team playoff. Let's say we had a 12-team playoff this year. And based on what most of our perspective and projection is on this season comes to fruition. Let's say Michigan wins the Big Ten and Penn State and Ohio State are right there. Okay. Let's say whether it's Clemson or Florida State, one of them wins the ACC, the other one's right there. Let's say Georgia wins the SEC again, but let's say Alabama's right there. Let's say Tennessee's right there and throw in somebody else, LSU. Okay. We've got who knows who's going to win the Big 12 this year. That's going to be a heck of a race. But let's say based on preseason projections that we see in these way too early top 25s, and I'm not talking about from a bunch of knuckleheads. I'm talking about from legitimate people that look at the sport. I guess Texas, there's really not a prohibitive favorite, but I guess Texas would be, and then you've got Kansas State and you've got TCU as the outliers that are going to be in that 15 to 20 range. Projection. Is all this going to come true? Of course not, because half of the AP top 25 doesn't finish, at least last season, and usually about only 15 to 18 of them finish in the top 25. Okay, but follow along. Who can go to a 12-team playoff in the Pac-12 as it currently sits? We're not going to the future in the Big Ten. We've got a 12-team playoff coming up this fall. USC, Utah, Oregon, Washington, Oregon State. So we've got a lot of candidates actually in the Pac-12. UCLA, this past season, they would have been a playoff contender. They would not have made it, but they would have been in it up until the last game of the season because they had an opportunity to win the Pac-12 championship. And if nothing else, they were obviously in a close game against USC to go to 10-2. So what do we have in the Pac-12? We got 6 teams. We've got, I'd say, easily 3 teams in the Big Ten. There's 9. We've got, it's kind of a tough call. The toughest calls in the Big 12, but we'll go with 3 teams, Texas, Kansas State, and TCU. We're up to 12 teams. We're up to, we probably have about 5 in the SEC. So we're at 17. Then we've got Florida State and Clemson. So we're at, where are we? 22. So throw in your favorite teams other than that. Notre Dame, Wisconsin, maybe. Another team from the SEC, maybe. Who do you like in the ACC, whether that's North Carolina to jump up or NC State? Okay. And we only need 12 of those. We just counted off. I was trying to round out 20 or 25, but we only need 12. We only need 11 because one's going to be a group of 5. I don't think that the teams that could make the playoff this year, and remember, we just had TCU make the playoff, and we, the year before, had Cincinnati make the playoff and Michigan, an unranked team, make the playoff. I don't think that expands anymore once the field goes to 12. It doesn't expand. Maybe that whole Big 12 is, they're all capable of going 5-7 or 10-2, 9-3. That whole conference, those programs could go in any one direction over the next 5 years. All of them. Houston can win the Big 12 in the next 5 years. TCU can win, of course, the Big 12 they just did, or Kansas State. That they're all, that's the one conference that's a huge wild card in all of this. But everybody else in the country, you can see a clear delineation between these are playoff contenders and these really aren't playoff contenders. It's pretty clear. And I don't think that the expansion of the playoff has opened this up to anyone else. It's only going to, again, mean that teams that were capable of making the playoff will make the playoff. All right. We got our buddy Tim Prangley on the line. What's going on, Tim?
I was driving home wondering, what's the name of the trophy for the best conference in America called?
The Voice of College Football Trophy.
Do they give one out every year? The best conference?
We tend to like to debate this, or just talk about it. It's not a debate. So your point being that you don't think it matters, or?
Oh no, I mean I think it's interesting conversation, but I just think that some people really take it to another level. Like being in the best conference means anything. Like for instance, do you really think that Georgia takes pride in South Carolina winning a game or Kentucky making a bowl game? I mean, I just don't see it. Better question would be, Mark, would you ever sit back and like see yourself saying chanting Big Ten in a stadium?
No.
Yeah. I think there's really good marketing by the SEC network, and it's really caught on with some of the, I guess, less fortunate. Let's face it, we talk about teams never going to make the playoffs. We got teams in the SEC that are probably never going to win the SEC championship game. Would you agree?
Yes.
So, I mean, we do these circles about yes, I would say the top 5 teams in the SEC are going to have a great chance to beat anybody in the country. I agree. Year in and year out, they have solid teams at the top. But then we get to hear all the time about the SEC is just so dominant and would destroy everyone. And just I don't know. I've been watching football long enough to realize that just doesn't happen. Someone could talk to Oregon State about what they thought about the SEC this year. So.
I believe that only 6 teams have won the SEC championship game, and it's been around since 1992. So you got
Kentucky one of them?
No. So you only have 6 out of 14 that have won the SEC championship game, and it's been around for 31 years.
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever chant Pac-12. I definitely won't be chanting Big Ten anytime soon. I think it's weird.
I see. That's, to me, that's not a right or wrong. That is up to the sports fan to decide how they want to look at that. When I was growing up, I wanted every Big Ten team to win bowl games. I rooted for the Big Ten teams in bowl games.
You rooted for Michigan to win their bowl game?
Absolutely, I did.
Mark,
I did. Absolutely, I did.
I'll be honest. Growing up, especially when the rivalry between USC and UCLA was a lot tighter, I was never rooting for UCLA to win a cakewalk, let alone win a because here's the thing: we're competing back in the day, especially back in the 80s and the 90s and early 2000s. Actually, Rick and I were looking at the early 2000s. A lot of those top recruits in Southern California were flipping a coin though back in those days. Am I going to SC? Am I going to UCLA? And them winning that bowl game might be enough to tip a recruit. Might, not necessarily. I think that fans, I think Gerard Martinez says a lot on Ryan's site, that fans care more about wins and losses during the season than the actual recruits do. They're more looking at, playing time and who their position coach is going to be. But, it still can be a bit of thing. But rooting for your rivals to win, I'm just sorry. It's like, for instance, I'm in the National League. When you look at the National League West, right? Am I going to be like excited about the Giants winning the pennant? You know what I mean? Hell no, I don't want that. I don't get why you root for your rival teams. It's different.
Yeah.
Why is it different?
It's professional sports.
Okay. Beyond the fact that one's college and one's pro.
Well, I grew up.
Why would you be more apt to root for your rival in college than I would think it's almost the opposite? Your rival in college, to me, again, I don't know. It's like more because not just my team, it's also my, where I went to school. There's a lot more deeper things to go along with it.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Why would
again, you're talking about so it sounds like you were processing some of these things at the age of, let's say, 20 or 25. I'm talking about being like 10 years old. I'm not processing who recruits are looking at and that sort of thing. That's the furthest thing from my mind. I didn't even know I think at 10 years old where these players came from. I had no idea how they thought they maybe just walked on campus and wanted to play for Ohio State or whomever. So that wasn't my thought process that, there are advantages or disadvantages to who wins games or bowl games that are going to impact my team. No, nobody taught me to think this way, or nobody. It's a heart condition. It's a root. We're talking about being fans. Most of the stuff that I do on here is more analytical, think it through, who's the best, the numbers support that, and the context and everything. But I'm talking about being a fan at 10 or 15 years old, and I didn't think about it. I didn't analyze it. I just went wherever my heart went. And when my heart and my eyes were watching Michigan State playing a bowl game against Washington, I wanted Michigan State to win the game. I can't explain it. They were in my conference. I wanted them to win the game.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm just curious. I mean, there's been so much excitement about my conference is better than yours, even though my team finished outside the top 25. But it was interesting. There were three three Big Ten schools. If so, we had the playoffs this year. Three Big Ten schools? You had three Pac-12 schools, an ACC school, a couple Big 12 schools. What was it? 2 or 3 SEC schools?
3.
It's a 3. You had 3.
I made it.
Yeah. So it seemed pretty. We're talking about these Power 5 and the little 8 or whatever, Power 2, little 8. But it looked like it was pretty well represented in this, at least this year, as far as who would be representing the playoffs.
Oh, and I think that's going to continue, unless it all depends. If we'll pick on the SEC as being, continuing dominance. If the committee is 5 years into this and the SEC is dominated, then they may carry over that judgment, that evaluation from season to season, and we may see a slope start where you can be 9-3 in the SEC, and it exists right now, where the SEC teams will get favored over teams in other conferences that have the same record.
Yeah, that's
now playoff spots.
That's been like the past 10 years. A lot of that has to do with Alabama's success. But things are beginning to change. You can't. For instance, there was a major shift in sports, like Oklahoma, USC. Some of these schools used to stack Texas. They used to stack their rosters. I mean, there wasn't an 85-man roster scholarship limit way back in the day. And so these schools would just stack player after player after player, and they'd have the best player, but also keep the other good players from going to other teams within the conference and around the country. Are you aware of that? Do you remember before the 85 scholarship rule? Well, the big rule happened here now with the transfer portal and the one-time free transfer. You're seeing these schools. Look at what's happened to A&M right now. That huge, the greatest recruiting class of all time. What happened to that greatest recruiting class of all time? It's melting away quickly because you don't have enough playing time for all these kids. You can stack them and you can get them in, but can you hold on to them for 3 years? And so I'm thinking that a lot of this talent that has been stacked on a lot of SEC rosters in the past is slowly going to disseminate out to the rest of the country. Now you have NIL. There's a little bit more than playing at home. If you have a financial reason to leave home, to leave Louisiana or Georgia, it sweetens the pot a little bit if you get a couple $1 million in order to do so, $500,000, $600,000. I think that the future of college football, as far as the demographics, so I know the population is moving south, but that doesn't mean all the money is moving south. And whereas we inch closer and closer to pro football and college football, now they're really doing NIL, which a lot of these schools aren't really doing the spirit of NIL. They're basically buying players. I think it's going to be spread out. The talent, at least, is going to be spreading out. And you are already seeing that. There's schools getting top talent that never used to get the top 50 guys, but there's these head scratcher pickups from teams that are willing to put the money out there and pick up some of these teams that have decent recruiting classes. So I don't know. I don't think that the power is going to stay in the. I think I don't know if you believe this, but I don't think the power is going to stay in the SEC. I think they had a great run. Again, mostly they can thank Alabama and and Nick Saban for that run and all the credit for it. But it's not going to stay like this. I just don't see it. There's more money already in TV for the Big Ten than there is for the SEC network. So I'll be curious seeing what's going to happen going forward. But I don't think you're going to see this dominance, and I certainly don't think we're going to be handing out trophies to the best conference in the country, because right now, and it has been a nice run for the SEC, and I don't think anyone's denying that they've had the best conference. But man, I think the difference is shrinking considerably over the past couple of years, and I can't wait to see 4 or 5 more years of this portal and this NIL. What will these rosters actually look like then?
I don't know necessarily that. So first of all, what you stated about your theory about recruits being collected by the SEC and then not getting the playing time and kind of fanning out to the rest of the country, we're just going to have to wait and see. I don't know that we can really look at the first 2 real big off seasons of transfer portal and come to that conclusion that the SEC teams have lost a ton of talent. I don't know. I cover it every day, but I haven't kept track to be able to say, yeah, SEC teams have lost more talent than anyone else.
Well, no, I don't think the SEC's lost more talent than anyone else. I think that we can say the SEC was getting the most talent over the past 10 years. It was going to the SEC or stay. Better, I say better way to say it would be is staying in the SEC. And, and where the SEC has the big advantage isn't at quarterback, isn't it skill position. It's usually isn't really even on offensive line. It's on those defensive lines is where the SEC, I believe, has had the biggest advantage.
Maybe it's accentuated there and maybe it starts there, but it's all over. It's not at every single position possibly, but it's not just defensive line, period. Or they wouldn't have the recruiting numbers that they have that completely blow away everybody else in the country. What I think could possibly happen for this discussion, we're looking at the playoff and we're looking at winning championships, is that the SEC will continue to be the best conference, but if the Big Ten in particular, and the ACC's got Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and I know Miami's a joke right now, but they've got a few big advantages to do something about it. But the Big Ten in particular could continue to be behind the SEC overall. But as long as USC, Ohio State, and Michigan in particular are super strong, then they can go into a playoff on a regular basis and take as many trophies.
Yeah, I don't think that the SEC is going to spread out to all of the country. Exactly. I'm saying they're not going to be able to stockpile it like they used to, and schools like the ones you just named. And here's one thing: you have 2 more teams entering. When you look at the recruiting rankings, it's skewed really, really harshly towards certain states. But when you look at the number of athletes on NFL rosters and what states they're from, for instance, number 1 is Florida, number 2 is Texas, and then number 3 is California still. And really, those 3, and it's not really close behind them. Well, Uncle Rico, then how come almost every single year the high school national champions come from Southern California? 2 schools, Mater Dei and St. John Bosco. Aggregate overall, I'm sure there's tons of great football. But if you want to talk about the top 2 teams, how often has Mater Dei or USC or St. John Bosco been the high school national champion? It's not like we don't have talent here in Southern California either. And for a while, schools like Clemson and Alabama and Ohio State have been coming into Southern California and grabbing some of the top talent here. But that's not always going to be that way, especially now that UCLA's joined the Big Ten, USC's joined the Big Ten. USC decided to get an actual coach that knows what he's doing. That's going to be reversed as well.
I was looking for a list. I can't find one, but anyway.
For the NFL?
For the NFL high school players.
Oh, not high school.
By state.
NFL players by
state.
by state where
Yeah.
they're from. Yeah, yeah. It's not, well. I mean, I can send you the link. I looked at it the other day. It's it
I
is
wish,
it's
I
not
wish I
like
could-
this skewed thing where I've seen where you know where 247 is located, Mark. Where do you think the headquarters for
Nashville,
247 is? It's not Nashville. It's some city in Texas I've never heard of.
Rivals is in Nashville.
Rivals, and guess who also is in Nashville? On 3, the new one.
Okay.
And I think 247 and On 3 are literally in the same building. So these guys, the headquarters are located in the South, which is where the majority of the town is, and I get that, but they're not evaluating. Their evaluations get worse and worse and worse, really, every year. The fact that they're saying they're what 5.
You think that? I don't know that
Yeah.
you can substantiate that.
I can substantiate it this way, Mark. They're big. The way they defend their rankings is they go, well, hey, half of the people we say are 5 stars make it to the NFL. That's what they say, and our numbers are really good in that. And you know what? More 4 stars than the 3 stars we have make it to the NFL.
Yep.
Mark, I think pretty much anybody, if they watch enough game film of the top 100 kids in the country, I can tell you with some pretty close, ability, which kids are going to go to the NFL, which kids are not. How many kids you see there are 3 stars that are on NFL rosters now? Tons.
Yeah,
I'm not saying,
but there are more 3 stars. That the point is that like 40% of the 5 stars make NFL rosters. The last numbers that I saw, 4 stars were 12, 14%, something in that range, and the 3 stars were 3 or 4%, something like that.
I know. But then we're saying, therefore, if you have a 4-star or a 3-star, that equals you're better. But if you're talking about 30%, look at the 5 stars, even 45, 40% are hit marks. That means 60 miss. And that means it drops off even farther from there. And then when you talk about the number 15 team to about the number 4 team, it's like such a small margin of which, of how good some of these teams are. The difference in, like, for instance, USC could jump up like 4 or 5 spots if they get Deuce, the kid from the tight end from Arizona. All of a sudden now they're all of a sudden they're in the top 7. It's like splitting hairs at some point. And then what we're saying is we're taking these evaluators and then we're saying, hey, these are the better teams because of this. I agree that the teams that have the most 5 stars, like in Alabama with 8 5 stars. Yeah, that's probably a pretty damn good team, right? Because that's 8 of the top 100 guys, almost for sure. 8 of the top 100 guys in the country. And we can almost say that almost without a doubt.
Well, they get a lot more than 8 of the top 100.
No, I'm saying they got
8 of the top 40.
Well, that's if you're saying these evaluators are actually accurate.
Yeah, if they're we're making all
I'm
these
trying to give them some
based on their rankings. Yeah,
and I'm giving some margin of error because I don't think these
of course,
guys.
there's a lot of margin of error.
So I'm not gonna say it's 8 of the top 40. I just said 8 of the top 100. I gave them some room, right? And I think they're probably close. They probably are in that range. But I just think that people put too much on the actual exact numbers. It should be, hey, are you hitting a lot of these highly regarded recruits? I tend to look at who has the most offers, not some number that they give.
But talent evaluation, I think it's a little bit more difficult than we are stating here, because think about the NFL. The NFL should be so much better at this than high school recruiters.
Agreed.
They just watched these players play 3 and 4 years at the highest level of college. They're watching Georgia and Alabama and USC. They're playing, and look at the first round of the NFL draft in any particular year.
100% agree with you. And that's what I'm saying. When it comes to talent, I think I've even heard you say, well, look at California. They only have like 5 stars, blah, blah. But if you look at the NFL draft every single year, and if you look at NFL rosters every single year, what state's way up on the top with Florida and Georgia and Florida and Texas? That's still California.
Maybe there's a downslide after that. Maybe there's more volume in those other states than California. That's the only determination I can make off of that. The point I'm making about the NFL draft is, you would think that after watching all these players for 3 or 4 years play at that level, that's such an advantage over watching a bunch of 16 and 17-year-olds who haven't yet physically or in other ways developed to really get a good read on them. They're watching a bunch of 20 and 22-year-olds, and there's still a ton of misses in the first round of the NFL draft.
Yeah, no, completely agree. but there are so many more misses. I mean, fans out there right now, I bet you if you want to go ahead, throw the chat the last time your absolute bust 5-star you had. I mean, every school has them. Well, actually, no, some schools don't have 5 stars. But I mean, any of you guys up there that are recruiting at a high level, there are tons of busts at 5-star, even tons of busts, top 100 players. I'm saying you're right. The evaluation process, I think they do a great job. I don't think anybody just go in there and start evaluating. I think the guys at 247 do a great job. But I just worry when people start hanging way too much on, well, this guy had a 98. This guy's a 97. So this guy at 98 is better than the guy at 97.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally how people talk. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Well, sure. They talk like that. And also you hear fan bases like, if this happens all the time with the top teams in the country, Georgia will have one running back who's number 2 in the country in the running back rate rankings, and the other guy's number 7. And everybody assumes we ignore the number 7 guy, like there's a big difference. And there's not. They're that close in the player evaluation, but we're talking about thousands of players. There just happen to be 4 running backs between those guys because they're all very close to each other. And I'll even hear most of the talk among the fan base is going to be about the number 2 running back in the country, and they'll practically ignore the other guy.
Well, USC, I remember there's a guy from Helix High, and he was a number 5 running back in the country. Of course, he was Reggie Bush, who clearly was not the 5th best running back in the country. But,
sure.
But I'm not trying to slam them. I'm just cautioning fans because I think they do a great job. Entertainment alone is worth your $10 a month. Believe me, it's great. I've been a subscriber to really whichever one Ryan's site was. It was either like Rivals, and then it was 247 Scout for a little while, then 247, and they do a good job. But it's not a science, and it just gets confusing when someone says, "Well, I think some caller was just saying." Well, this team's got like the number 7 ranked class, so then therefore they can't win the national championship. I'm like, I just want to say, really, do you watch football? Because again, the bigger part is also evolving. The portal is so much more important now. Like the portal, literally, you got to see, like you were talking about the NFL evaluators get to see a guy play in college for 3 years, right? 4 years, 5 years, and they make that evaluation. Well, if you're a head football coach, you get to watch a guy, play running back for 3 years, or an offensive tackle for 3 or 4 years, or a cornerback for 3 years. You have a proven player in college.
And in some ways, it's even easier or more valid observation and evaluation because they are recruiting those players to play on the same level that they're watching the film on versus an NFL personnel director having to project a college player to the NFL. So, the portal evaluation should be really accurate.
And that's the thing with quarterbacks, right? That window just gets from high school to college gets smaller. From college to pro, it gets even smaller. The timing, the reads, everything just gets sped up. So just telling you guys, beware. I mean, we had a 5-star rush end that was the best player in the country who hasn't really even seen the field in 3 years at my school, 2 years. Yeah. And, I think he's trying hard. I think he's a great Trojan, and I hope the best for him this year. But we've got a guy that's coming in this year, and we've seen his game film, and he's just a beast. And he's going to come in right away, and he's going to be a starter on our team. So be careful, because at best it's a projection when you're getting your recruiting class. But if you start seeing those top portal guys coming into your school, proven guys, then I'd love to see how many playoff teams have had transfer quarterbacks over the past 7 years. Like how many of these playoff teams had their starting quarterback that they get them into recruiting, or they come through the portal that made it to the playoffs? There's probably a fair share of teams that had portal guys come in.
I think we're going to see that maybe in the next 5 years, but we haven't seen that yet. Justin Fields.
Maybe not playoff, but I would say
it's going to happen going forward.
I'll change that. What about like conference champions, playoff contenders? Yeah, you're right. Okay, so not that many, but I do think you're going to see it a lot with the way the quarterbacks are flying around now, because it just comes down to the same thing. You don't have the ability to stack these guys or keep them because they don't have to sit out anymore. I do think that's going to affect football more than people realize it. The fact that you can't stack your roster, that means that they're not going to go to some loser team. They're going to want to go to a contender, right? That is going to give them playing time. And that's not just a quarterback position. That's going to be at running back. That's going to be at receiver. That's going to be at the line. And then also you're going to have one more thing. I like the fact that the Pac-12 is now going to be kind of like our farm system. Oh, I said it, Pac-12. I mean, Riley's already doing it right now. We're taking the best teams, their players off the best teams. If it's Oregon, if it's down all the way to Arizona, USC for the past 2 years ago, we'll have this guy, we'll have that guy. And I see that's going to be something that's going to happen for all of the top programs in the country. You can see Georgia, you can see Alabama already doing it. So it's just going to continue to happen. And so you're going to have farm systems, even within your own league, that you're going to be plucking from. And of course, USC is going to be the Big Ten, but I think we'll still use the Pac-12 as a farm system because it's on the West Coast.
A lot of these top transfer portal guys, a lot of us aren't familiar with them because what's happened is they were under-evaluated or they were underdeveloped coming out of high school, and they went to a MAC school. You know, one of the very best, he's rated a top 10 in the transfer portal, this Jason Fisk. He went to Florida State, and I was like, who is this guy? Well, he's at Central Michigan, and now he's evaluated to be tremendous. But nobody knew who he was because he's playing in the MAC. But he wasn't highly regarded coming out of high school, but he's turned himself into, and the coaches have turned him into, an exceptional player. And now he's a pro prospect, and he's going to go to Florida State.
Yeah.
And in the past, he would have been stuck at Central Michigan and probably been a lower regarded NFL prospect. And that would have been, now he gets a chance to really up his stock at a higher level.
I'm wondering when the day is going to happen in college football where you actually have almost a position. You know, we had a recruiting coordinator was a title they usually give to one of the coaches. But yeah. I'm wondering when they're going to have a GM, because now, and I know everyone's saying that, oh, well, you know, you can't pay. I mean, let's not pretend what's going on. Teams are going to have to start deciding how much money am I going to allocate to my actual roster I have that I want to keep? How much do I want to allocate to getting guys from the portal? And then who am I going to put my money at? You know, and Nick Saban told a guy who wanted his girlfriend to get into law school and then pay for it. The guy said, go kick, you know, and Saban said, go kick rocks. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's getting out of control. I think that they're going to start looking towards, I want to put my money towards proven commodities.
And the other reason why the GM may be needed is that right now there are no restrictions on these rosters. They've let that go because of the COVID year and all this other stuff. And they're just kind of letting these teams go crazy with scholarships and with it. But if that gets reined back in and it's back to a strict 85 and 105 on the roster, well, that's got to be constantly managed.
Yeah. Well, I think that the 85 is still there. It's just you could take as many guys in a cycle now, I believe. Yeah, I think you got to be below the 85. But you can't. But the rule about the rule about getting 25 in 1 year, you know, it is gone. Someone correct me in the chat if I'm wrong.
I'm not counting scholarships on rosters, but I'm hearing from people that I trust that follow particular teams and are good at what they do that there are scholarship numbers that are blowing through, you know, the high 80s into the low 90s.
Yeah, but they're going to be cutting kids. They're going to that's for the kids that, you know, where the dark side we don't want to talk about, where these fourth year guys that haven't contributed, they're going to be told to find somewhere else to play, which is nothing new. Yeah. But I mean, I think now, because it's so cutthroat, I think they have to keep them on scholarship to school, but I think, or you know, I don't know how it works, but the idea that a kid's going to be a character guy and, you know, be a scout guy for 4 years and then, you know, maybe get his Rudy moment his senior year, those years are gone. They need those scholarships, and if you're on a team that's a top 25 team, they're gonna cycle you out so they can bring someone else in. And I mean, I think some coaches are ahead of the game on that. I think some of the schools have been a little more ruthless on that, and you know what? Those are winning programs, and I guess you got to do what you got to do. And given the fact that you have to keep everyone happy, you got to manage your money, and there are always opportunities out there. And now with the portal, it's not just, you know your roster going into February signing day and right out of it. Now it's like you can get guys all the way up into like June, July, August. guys are popping onto rosters. I don't know what the latest date is for them to get in, but you just last minute changes. It's gonna be brutal. But I just said, I just want to warn anybody. I think what we knew of in recruiting and stars and this and that, I think the big recruiting companies are bagging on the recruiting and say, oh no, it's still built on your recruiting class from high school. Well, these are also the guys that make their money running camps, making lists, chasing down interviews with high school kids, etc. Of course they're going to say that. But I think the future is almost like free agency. And as a couple of guys, USC past players said, it's like free agency, but without these cycles. You can almost get a free agent anytime you want. There's no contract at all. From year to year, minute to minute, you could change teams just like that.
But if somebody enforces the one-time transfer rule, then we're back to recruiting being more important, because just like the NFL, you can't build a football roster on free agency. You build it through the draft and supplement through free agency.
I still think that your meat and potatoes is going to be your recruiting class, but I think it's not like it used to be, especially with the early recruiting, early signing day. I just think that it's never going to be the same where you knew what your roster was going to be. I think that there's roster over, this could change, overhaul, even the next couple of months. As soon as spring ball ends, some guy, some high 5-star from last year realizes he's second, third on the depth chart, and he can go somewhere else and play immediately. That guy's going to leave. So you can't stack. I remember USC had some great running back classes where they had 3 or 4 guys. And what are they going to do? Sit out and go somewhere else? No, they sat there and then grad transferred somewhere at some point. Now, if you have that situation, especially some of these schools like Georgia or Alabama with all this talent, or even Ohio State, if you get stacked up and you're playing behind like 2 or 3 guys, you can just leave and make money somewhere else. So, all right, Mark.
Tim. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Take it easy.
We have our West Virginia show coming up here in about 5 minutes, so keep it right here at the Voice of College Football. We're going to catch these super chats. We appreciate them coming in. Thank you so much for that. We got Cole on the line, big Husker fan, GBR. Riley's downfall will always be Alex Grinch, and maybe that will be the case until he cuts him loose. Alex Grinch had the 124th ranked defense against yards per play last year, but he also didn't have the horses. And he did improve the Oklahoma defense his first year that he was there. They were substantially better. They weren't great, but did a nice job at Washington State, but didn't finish the job at Oklahoma. And again, we shall see on Alex Grinch. I know most USC fans would like to see him gone. We ran a poll over on the USC channel where about 75% said get rid of Alex Grinch, but that has that train obviously is left the station for this particular season. I don't see that happening. Todd Gwynn, appreciate the super chat contribution as well. Is there truly a scholarship limit with NIL money? Again, there is a scholarship limit. Who's going to enforce it? The NCAA, with all their inconsistencies and all their hypocrisies from the past, at least they enforced what they wanted to enforce. Now they don't seem to be going after anything or anyone. I haven't seen them make any kind of disciplinary action in forever. And there's all sorts of investigations and just random hanging details and information and all of that at places like LSU that I expected to result in something. But that was before, again, the pandemic year. That was before all of this came unraveled with the NIL and the transfer portal and the NCAA backing out of all this. And now they don't seem to be doing anything. Look at the Arizona State situation with Herm Edwards and the recruiting violations that is well documented what happened for the most part. We know that there were violations, but I don't believe anything's been levied against Arizona State. LSU, again, Darius Geis, Ed Ogeron, all that mess. There's all sorts of incidents. You can look up all sorts of sites and all sorts of information that's been confirmed. And we've talked about it on here at the time. Well, I haven't heard anything levied against LSU concerning that. So I don't know what's going on with all that. So the scholarships, again, I'm not a scholarship expert on how all of that works, or certainly in this world, how it works, or if it's being sanctioned at all. All I know is that we have reputable writers come on here on a regular basis and have been stating that the such and such rosters at 89, the such and such rosters at 94. And we will see if that gets cleaned up before the season, or if these teams are allowed to carry extra players, as they have been ever since 2020. The issue in all of this, the number one issue, is that there is no commissioner of college football. There is no governing body to oversee the entire situation. Now, once that would be your first problem would be, who is going to be the commissioner of college football, or who are going to be the governing body members, and how are they going to be selected? I would guess the best way to select them would be to have all the conference commissioners and the institution presidents vote, have candidates, have them be interviewed, and then have them vote for their 8-team panel, their 9, I guess you'd have to have an odd number, 9, 13, whatever, as your governing body or your commissioner. And then he would have some type of council or board under him, just like the commissioner of the NFL, with all the team owners. That's what has to happen to rein any of this in, or otherwise it's going to continue to run wild. So off the field, we're going to have the transfer portal, we're going to NIL, we're going to have recruiting violations all over the place, just run wild. On the field, we're going to continue to have inconsistency with officiating, with conference alignments, with scheduling. All these things are going to continue to be not correct. And we're going to continue to have conferences that are going to look out for themselves, which there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with Greg Sankey looking out for the SEC, making every move that he can to increase the power and the influence and the value of the SEC. That's what he's paid to do. But in doing so, he often is hurting the rest of college football. And I'm not just stating Greg Sankey. He is able to do that. He and Kevin Warren, or whoever the next Big Ten commissioner is going to be, they're able to do that because they're in a place of power. The other conference commissioners are in a place of weakness. So what they do doesn't quite impact the rest of because they're not playing from a position of power. But they're doing the same thing, or hopefully they are. They should be. They're making the best moves for their conference. That's what they're paid to do. And that's what they should do. But that's not always best. If every NFL owner was able to, or every division within NFL was autonomous like the conferences, and they just made decisions based on what they wanted and what they thought was best for them, and they had different schedules, and they had all these things and handled the pandemic season completely different, well, it would be chaos. And that's the way it would be. Anyway, we will be back in just a couple minutes with the West Virginia show. I did think that it was interesting to run down the 5 stars for the 2018 class. Listen to these 5 stars. You're going to see superstars. You're going to hear some other names that you're probably like, wow, I forgot about him because he didn't amount to anything. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Xavier Thomas, Ayabi Anoma, Micah Parsons, Patrick Surtain, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, Justin Shorter, Zamir White, Jamari Salyer, Amon Ross St. Brown, Tyson Campbell, Terrace Marshall, KJ Henry, Polite Gaotiote, almost forgot how to pronounce his name, from USC that went to Ohio State, JT Daniels, Jackson Carman, Adam Anderson, Caden Stearns, Teron Vincent, Tyreek Johnson, Cade Mays, Brenton Cox, BJ Foster, Lorenzo Lingard, Darian Kendrick, Ricky Slade, Elijah Griffin, Bray Walker, Jalen Gill, and there's your 5-star list from 2018. I went that far back because obviously they should all be in the NFL at this point. Star Trek, appreciate you being here. Can you just take away a kid's full ride scholarship because he was a bust? I have no idea. Thank you for the contribution, but I don't know. I would think that you can't. You made a commitment just like the player makes a commitment, the student athlete makes a commitment. I would think not, as long as he is passing his classes, showing up for practice, doing all the right things. I would think that that's a contract that can't be broken. Maybe there is some type of lesser condition that can be, you can say, you know what, we got to burn this scholarship. We got to keep this particular player, but you no longer are able to play here. But we've got to eat that scholarship, and for the length of your eligibility, then we've got to eat it. I don't know what the answer to that is. All right, everyone, we are shutting down. We're going to be right back here on the same page, so just keep it right where you are. We're going to shut down this link. We'll be back with the West Virginia show in 2 minutes.